Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Professionals You Should Know. This show is about uncovering the journeys of professionals from different industries. And today, we have the informative and eloquent Shanice Akinyambo, who is a research midwife. So it's a pleasure having you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. So, what is it that you do?
So I am a midwife. I am a specialist midwife. So I actually am a research midwife. So I'm a midwife, but I also specialise in research particularly.
What research is it?
So lots of different research. So I work for the University of Oxford, and we've got lots of different things that we're doing at the moment. One of the studies is about women who have high blood pressure in pregnancy. There are two medications that we generally tend to use, but the study is trying to find out which one is best. So at the moment it's down to whatever the preference of the doctor is. But yeah, the whole purpose of the study is to find out actually definitively
which one is the best one.
Which one's the better one.
So why a midwife? Why midwifery and why specialising in the midwife?
Yeah, so my journey's been a long journey.
Okay.
So I qualified as a midwife later on in my life.
Okay.
And originally I wanted to become a doctor. But I didn't get the A-levels for it.
Right.
And then I studied biomedical science.
Okay.
And then I was like, okay, I want to do something completely different. So for about 10 years, I just did lots of different things.
Right.
But then I thought, actually, no, I want to go back into the medical field.
Is there a particular reason why medical field?
That's just my first love, I suppose.
Right.
So I think that's kind of, I wanted to be back in healthcare. So I'm a woman of faith, and so I prayed and I was like, God, what do you want me to do? You know, and I felt like God was saying to me that I want you to be happy with whatever I call you to, regardless of how it may look, essentially. So he was saying, even if I want you to be a cleaner, that's what I want you to do, you know, regardless of how it looks. And so it was a really humbling experience, because I had to kind of, it's almost like my dream of becoming a doctor. I tried that again 10 years later. It wasn't working. Doors weren't opening for me. And so that's when I ended up going back to God and saying, okay, God, clearly this is not what you want me to do. So what do you want me to do? And then that's when he came back with that response. So then I was like, okay, so what do? I was looking at different things, whether I wanted to be a paramedic or an occupational therapist, things that I could use with my biomedical background. And then somebody mentioned to me whether I'd consider being a midwife. And I said, oh, okay. So I kind of looked at the, definition of a midwife. Midwife, the literal name means with woman. And I was like, I love working with women. I have my own non-profit organisation.
Really?
That's centred around women specifically. So it's a women's ministry. And so I knew that I had a passion and a love for women. And ironically, when I was, in secondary school, when you go around and you visit the different unis and things, I actually sat in one talk about midwifery. But because it wasn't like a real thing for me at that moment, I was like medicine. I kind of just left it. But it's funny, you come full circle. So I was brought full circle again. And so I was looking at it again, older, wiser, now under, a spiritual perspective, thinking, okay, actually, I think I'm called to this. I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I said, okay, I'm going to apply and see if the doors are opening, then fair enough. But if not, then clearly it's not. And they did. They opened.
Wow.
So that's how I became a midwife. And yeah, like I said, my personal life and my professional life really are joined together because I have a genuine passion for women, and for empowering women, for women knowing who they are, for women being able to, know their full identity in Christ, and also just to be able to walk that out, in day-to-day life, in whatever that means for them. And in my job, I support women.
Yeah.
And so, I was a clinical midwife. So I was a rotational midwife, which means I was in the delivery suite, in the labour room, I was in the postnatal area, I was in the antenatal area. I did all the areas, basically. And then I decided, actually, I want to specialise in research.
Why research?
Because when you're doing practice, when you're actually being a midwife on the shop floor, I like to call it, when you're being a shop floor midwife, there are certain questions that come up in practice. For example, a question that's come up most recently and has got a bit more public attention, or media attention, should I say, is the disparity between, black women and Caucasian women. Black women are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth compared to their Caucasian counterparts, and Asian women are 2 to 3 times more likely to die. So these statistics have been there for a very long time. Unfortunately, they've changed slightly. So I think the last major report that was done was saying it's 4 times instead of 5 times, but equally it's still
too much.
Yeah, the disparity is there, and there's certain questions that I'd ask my lecturers. I say, why is this? And they didn't know. There's a lot we don't know. And what I like about research is the fact that you ask that question and then you go and seek the answers to that question, and it's part of being I like the idea of being part of innovative change. The work that we do can really change how we do midwifery in this country across the, nationally. Some of the studies that we are really national studies. So, I just like being a part of that big movement.
Oh, that's incredible. And is there any particular story that you have that kind of reinforce that this is the particular pathway that you're on? Is a particular pathway that you want to continue to be on?
There's many times I've not wanted to continue, because being a midwife is a very hard vocation. Really? I think a lot of people think it's just, we just hold babies all day, and we have a great job, but we do have a great job, and it's a privilege, but it's a huge responsibility. Anything a midwife does is kept on record until that individual, that baby, is 25 years old.
Really?
From a legal perspective. So they could come back at any point and say, actually, let's go back and see what you did, see what you documented, so the responsibility is huge.
Until 25?
Until 25.
What?
Don't ask me why, I have no idea. I have no idea why, but that's what it is. And so there's a lot of pressure.
I can imagine.
On healthcare professionals in general. There's a lot of stuff going on with the NHS at the moment. Unfortunately, it's really understaffed, really underfunded. A lot of people are unhappy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure, especially over the past couple of years when we've had COVID. It's been even more so. But I would say there are times where I just have that satisfaction that this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. There was a lady that I was caring for in the antenatal period. So she'd come for her appointment, checkups, normal checkup. She wasn't a native English speaker. And I'm particularly passionate about disadvantaged women, women from a disadvantaged background. And so she was kind of like, I said to her, would you like an interpreter? We can get one on the phone. And she was like, oh, no, it's fine. And I think she did that because she didn't want to be a burden to me. And she's probably had that kind of reaction from other midwives, like, oh, okay, it's long, it takes long and all that kind of stuff. But actually, I said, no, I think we do need to get the interpreter, because what we were going to discuss, I wanted her to make sure that she really understood what I was saying to her. So I got the interpreter on the phone, and yes, the appointment did take longer, and yes, it was, what it was. But, at the end of it, she said to me, you know what, I'm really grateful. That's the first time I've really understood what has been said, like fully. You were very clear. And I said, you're welcome, and you know, that for me was kind of an affirmation that actually this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, naturally, I love, you know, like I said, working for women, working for women, supporting women. And I am a woman.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just kind of in me, I guess. And yeah, I've just noticed that I'm good at my job. You know, I know what I'm doing. I'm passionate about, you know, the women that I'm supporting. And now in a research capacity, but I just you just know that you know. I guess.
Yeah, I can see.
So,
I can see the compassion and the passion to do your job. Is there anyone that you feel that appreciates your service the most? It could be like government or patients, or particularly, I guess, patients.
I would say patients. Yeah. Although some, you know, that I mean. Yes, on the whole, I would say on the whole, yes, patients, most likely, because, you know, there's times where you've been with a couple and you've been in the labour room and you've been with them for 12 and a half hours and, you know, they've recognised that, you know, you've been supporting them, you've been really trying, and then, you know, I remember there was a husband that came back and he said, we just wanted to say thank you, and they got me like 2 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do with all of these, but I really appreciate it. So I kind of shared it with my team. But so it's stuff like that, you know. It's stuff like I remember when I'd first started out as a very, very newly qualified midwife, and I had to look after a really sensitive situation. So there was a preterm baby, so preterm is before 37 weeks, right. And this baby was 24 weeks, which is in this country is still an age up until which you can perform a legal abortion.
Okay.
And so the situation was that this particular lady, it was kind of unexpected. We were trying to prolong her pregnancy, but baby wanted to come at that point. So it was a very, very sensitive time, obviously for her, also for her husband. It was a child that they really, you know, had really desired for a long time. You know, I was fortunate that I had a great team. So I had, you know, the neonatal team, baby specialists and the baby doctors, and, you know, I had obstetricians, so, you know, the specialised doctors for pregnant women. And, you know, the outcome was a really good outcome. And I remember, although it was quite traumatic for everybody involved, because, you know, although it was a good outcome, it was still quite, you know, heavy emotionally. I remember there was weeks later, in fact, I think it was a couple of months later, where I bumped into the mum, and I was just passing through the neonatal unit, and she stopped me and she was like, "Oh, hello, do you remember me?"
Right.
And I was like, "Yes." I'm trying to think back, like, I'm pretty sure. So she was like, "I was the crazy one," and I was like, yeah, it could be anyone, but no, I was like, no, I know, I remembered her face, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, my baby's doing so well." She showed me pictures of how, you know, baby's developing since then, and it was just really heartwarming. Yeah. You know, it's really heartwarming, you know, when someone just says thank you and just appreciates you, you know, it's really underestimated, but appreciation goes a long way, you know, it really does. Agree. So,
and do you feel there's any like misconceptions to your role? I know you said about carrying babies.
I carry babies all day, which I do not. I would love to, because I love babies, but that's not really what we do. Midwives are, like I said, the name literally means with woman, right? And so we support women. We also support babies. Yes.
Is that from when they conceive?
Yes, because a woman's antenatal journey begins once they've conceived. Right. Sometimes it actually begins before that, because they're trying to get pregnant. So you're supporting them through that 9 months or whatever it is, which is one aspect of midwifery, and then you've got another aspect of midwifery which takes over when mum now goes into labour and has the baby. Right. And then there's another aspect of midwifery after the baby's born, And so there's lots of different categories, and there's lots of things that midwives do. And so there's lots of different specialist midwives like myself. I'm a research midwife, but there's also an IT specialist midwife. There's also safeguarding specialist midwives. There's also all kinds of different midwives, you know, trauma specialist midwives. So, and there's consultant midwives, and yeah, so many different things. So I think the misconception is that we hold babies all the time, and there's a lot more to what we do.
They hold babies. Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, I would absolutely hold your baby.
Yeah.
But it's not what I do. It's not what I get paid to do. So actually, yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna go to another point of the show. It's called rapid fire. It's just 3 questions. Either pick a choice or yes or no. All right. So our first question.
Yeah.
Is perineum tearing more common with women over 30?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't actually know the statistics on that, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I guess I can understand why that could be a thing, because when you're thinking about just in terms of anatomy and physiology, you're thinking about the elasticity of the skin and stuff obviously decreases over time. So it's possible. I would say it's possible. I would say it's possible that is the case, but I actually don't know for sure. But I would say it makes sense from what I know, because technically women are actually at their prime at 18 to have children.
18?
Yeah. That's actually the kind of prime. Obviously, most women are not 18 when they have their babies. However, you do find, I guess from my experience, let me put it that way, from my experience, I found that younger mums have generally had a smoother experience. I mean, that's a very huge generalisation. There's lots of different variables, but yeah.
Is that 18 globally or UK?
I think that's globally. I think that's just how we're created, I guess. So yeah, obviously you can have babies after that.
Of course
we do, but yeah.
18. Yeah, interesting. And so you would say probably. So I would say yes.
That's your word. I did not say that word. You said it.
All right.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick with my probably, but yeah.
So for our second question, would you rather attend a home birth or a birth on the ward?
Birth on the ward. I feel bad about that, but because I've actually not, in my experience, and even when I was a student, I haven't attended a home birth.
Really?
It's quite unusual, actually. Most midwives have, and I guess because my career is still ongoing. I'm still quite early on in my career, but yeah, I haven't. So yeah, that's the only reason I say that. But home births, I mean, absolutely. If you can have a home birth, have a home birth.
Okay.
You know, being in your own environment, because that's when your natural oxytocin is going to come through, the hormones that produce the contractions. And we know that women tend to progress, and what we mean by progress is like go through the stages of labour better when they're in their home environment, their natural environment. So yeah, I've heard they're wonderful and beautiful when they go well, but I haven't had the privilege of being able to be at one. So that's why I would say the ward, because that's just what I know. And what I'm comfortable with, because I'm thinking about it from a midwife perspective. If that makes sense, right? Like as a practitioner, so I'm thinking, which environment would I be most comfortable in? The ward would be.
Is it because you have the team as well, just in case something goes wrong? Or?
Yes, although we are all trained to know what to do, even if we were, at a home birth or someone's house. Right. However, there's one thing about head knowledge and actual knowledge, like working knowledge. So yes, I know what to do in my head, but I've not actually had to put that into practice. So would I feel confident? Not necessarily.
Right. Okay.
If that makes
sense.
That
makes sense. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So on you don't, there's not like a placement where it's just home births. So women.
So not every. So the most recent trust that I've worked at, they had a home birth team specifically.
Oh.
However, when I was studying as a student, they didn't have a specific home birth team. So it depends on where you are, depends on what's going on. Yes, I was on call, what we call on call. So it means that if there is a home birth, then you're going to get called to a home birth. However, I wasn't ever called, so it's just kind of what happened, really. It's not like I've been trying to avoid that. It just hasn't called my name. So therefore, you know, I haven't attended one. But yeah, so it just depends on the structure of the hospital that you're training at. It also depends on the opportunities that you have. So my experience of training as a midwife is going to be different from somebody else's experience who trained, I don't know, somewhere in another part of the country, because the demographic is different, the women are different, the teams are different. You may not have so for example, the hospital that I'm working at now as part of the University of Oxford and the hospital I've worked at previously, they are what we call tertiary units. So that means that they have a neonatal ICU, intensive care unit for neonates, which is the highest level essentially. So not every hospital has one of those. So again, that means, you know, if you work in a hospital, you're going to have a different experience to someone that's working in a hospital that doesn't have one of those. So that's kind of what it's like, if that makes any sense. So it really depends on, there's so many variables, where in the country you are, what you're exposed to, what hospital you're at, and just what happens when you're training, really.
So for our third and final question, with the demanding hours of your role, which activity would you recommend to uphold your stamina? Swimming or Pilates?
They're both good, obviously. As you know, physiotherapist. However, what would I say? Maybe for me personally, Pilates, I think, because I developed sciatica when I was training to be a midwife.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't have that before. So I had a trapped nerve in my neck, but then it ended up travelling down and becoming sciatica. So I know that for that kind of thing, Pilates is quite good for the flexibility and stuff like that. So I would probably say that.
For stamina?
For stamina, yeah. Just because you're on your... depending on what kind of midwife you are, depends on... But if you're a shop floor, like I'm saying, if you're working on the wards, working in the hospital, that kind of thing, then most likely you're going to be on your feet most of the time. And like you said, there are 12.5-hour shifts. They're long hours, so that's being on your feet a lot, you know. So I would say Pilates for someone like me who has sciatica. But for other people, you know, swimming is fantastic. I know a lot of people that do swimming too. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
But you can do both.
Yeah.
That works as well. If you want to be really, really ready for the job, then you can do both. It's not even just the physical stamina. You have to have mental stamina, psychological, emotional stamina, because if you are constantly giving, you know, of your energy, of your time, of your emotions, you're constantly supporting somebody, whether it's one person in a delivery room or whether it's on a ward where you're seeing several women at one time and several babies at one time, or whether you're seeing woman after woman after woman, like in the community or in the antenatal ward or something like that. So it's very draining in that sense. So stamina, I guess, is a broad thing. So it's not just physical stamina. You do need mental stamina, psychological stamina, emotional stamina, and it helps to have a good network. Right. Yeah, and to mentally prepare yourself for going into a role like that. Because I know, unfortunately, people that are not still midwives that I trained with, that didn't finish the courses for various different reasons. And there are a lot of people, unfortunately, leaving the profession. We're very short on midwives.
Is that because it's just too demanding? It's too much?
Yeah, it's really hard work. It's really hard work.
Yeah.
I think there's a combination of things. At the top end, we've got a lot of experienced midwives that have been midwives longer than I've been alive, but they're kind of looking to retire. And then there's midwives like myself who are coming into it, but not everyone's sticking with it or staying with it because it's actually very challenging. The circumstances now with healthcare is very different to 10, even 5 years ago actually. So it's changed a lot. And so you've got people leaving at one end, and then you've not got a lot of people coming in at the other end, if that makes sense. Or if they are qualifying as midwives, sometimes they're going into the private sector, they're going abroad, they're doing something completely different, etc. So retention is a very big thing at the moment. There's a lot of kind of roles coming out for midwives that will help organisations retain their staff. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that as well.
Yeah.
For our last few questions, what do you feel the healthcare industry, in your opinion, what do you feel the healthcare industry would be without midwives and research midwives?
Oh, it wouldn't be a very great place. Okay. I don't think. I think it's difficult because in the same instance, I say it wouldn't be a very good place, but there was once upon a time, and there are still places in the world where there aren't officially midwives in the way that we know midwives here. And they get along just fine. Well, not just fine. I mean, there's a lot of different things that don't go well, but that's not because of them. That's just because of the resources. There's it's not a resource-rich environment. I think it would be a very sad day if there were no midwives, particularly in this country. Just very sad because we are specialists. You know, we're trained and to be able to support women, and I think women not having that support would be very. I mean, they would have it in the sense of you also get doulas.
Okay.
So women that support women. But they're not necessarily trained as midwives are trained. But they can emotionally support women and take them through, the labour process and stuff. So you'd probably get more doulas, I would say, if there weren't any midwives. But I wouldn't like to see a world without midwives and without research midwives as well, because then how are we moving forward? How are we improving, the NHS? How are we improving care? How are we getting better? If we don't do the background research and ask these questions and find answers to them.
Yeah, and as you said, that women are at one of their most vulnerable times as well. So they need that physical, mental, emotional support,
Absolutely.
as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very valuable role that you play in society. So okay. And do you feel that you see any progression in the industry? So I know from the research point you're doing loads more things, but as midwife as a whole, do you see it progressing in any way?
100%. I that's one of the things that drew me to midwifery in the first place.
Okay.
I like the fact with midwifery that I am what we call an autonomous practitioner. So it means that I don't need to necessarily. I have my own authority over what I do, if that makes sense. But there's loads of different things you can do as a midwife. I can go into lecturing, I can go into, like I said, consultant midwife, I can go into working for, organisations such as the Royal College of Midwives, the NMC, Nursing and Midwifery Council. I could work in places like with social care with social workers and stuff like that. I could work abroad because I'm qualified, so I can. There are certain places where you can carry that into other countries, and they recognise that. There's just so many different avenues, and I'm a naturally driven person, an ambitious person, so I wouldn't have gone into something that I couldn't see myself progressing through. Okay.
Do you see the profession progressing? So, for example, as you're saying, like, women are 4 times.
I would love that to change. I would love that to change, and not just that in the UK, but globally. there are still, unfortunately, a lot of women, when we talk about global health, that are dying for things that we have readily available in this country.
Really?
Because they don't have the proper resources.
Mm.
So there is a lot of work to be done globally in terms of women's health, and particularly, you know, when it comes to pregnancy and birth and childbirth. And I would love to see a push for a change, you know. I don't know whether it's realistic to say that it's ever going to not be a thing, but I would love to think that there is going to be progression in that area.
Do you know what it would take? Is it more like education or more research?
I think it would take a lot of things,
right?
Because, like I said, your experience of who you become as a midwife depends a lot on the environment in which you've been trained, what you've been exposed to. And that varies massively across the country, because London, for example, is highly populated, you know, got wide social demographic of people, so many different people from so many different cultures and all of that. But in certain areas of the UK, that isn't the case. So you're not going to be exposed to certain things. So it's very difficult. To kind of put something that's like a bit blanket across the board, if that makes sense. But yes, more education, more awareness, definitely more initiatives. There are more initiatives that are popping up in terms of you know, us being more aware of the fact that there are these disparities. There are more advocates that are popping up as well for women of colour. More non-profit organisations that also are supporting women of colour. So there are slow changes, but I definitely feel it's going to take a lot of change, you know, in all areas, you know, to really move forward.
And do you think there's anything missing from the profession at all?
It's quite a few things. Yeah, I think at the moment, I think there's a lot of fatigue within the profession at the moment.
Right.
Right. And I guess I'm just speaking, but you know, other people may say something different. But it's been a hard couple of years in healthcare, and you know, when there's things such as you know, when the budget is announced and there's like a 1%, you know, increase in our salaries, but at the same time, you know, tax and inflation is going up, and so that doesn't really mean anything. It's quite confusing because it can be very confusing, you know, because, you know, there was once upon a time where, you know, we had people on their doorsteps every Thursday clapping for us. And then you know, so, you know, there's quite a few, and that's no shade to anybody, but it's just, there needs to be more, you know, there needs to be more support for staff, there needs to be more staff, there needs to be more money in the NHS, and it needs to be more feasible, you know, for the healthcare professionals that are in the NHS. You know, I love the NHS, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic system. I've been to other countries and I've seen how there is a lack of NHS and how awful it can be. But unfortunately, the NHS doesn't have everything it needs for it to really sustain itself long term. And so, so there needs to be some big changes.
Oh, yeah, I've learned so many new things today. You know, I learned some statistics as well, and obviously about the physical, emotional, and psychological fatigue that you guys can go through. So yeah, it's been very insightful.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And is there any way that we can find you or find more information on what you have? Or what you're going on, especially research based?
Yes, so the University of Oxford, I work specifically for under the women's reproductive health, women's and reproductive health. So it's under Nuffield, the medical divisions.
Wow.
So yeah, they're all over LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter.
Okay.
And also I have my non-profit, like I said, Sisters in Christ Ministries. We have a website, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, and it's Sisters, SISTAS, rather than EIS.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, it's been fab. It's been absolutely a pleasure having you on the show. It's been amazing of hearing your story and the research to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining.